Stillness Is the Key by Ryan Holiday begins with a simple but deeply important claim. The ability to become still is one of the most valuable abilities a human being can develop. In a world obsessed with speed, stimulation, reaction, and visibility, stillness can sound almost uninteresting. It can sound passive, soft, or secondary. But Holiday argues the opposite. Stillness is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not avoidance. It is a kind of inner steadiness that allows people to think clearly, act wisely, and live with greater meaning. The world constantly pulls us outward. It fills our attention, triggers our emotions, multiplies our commitments, and trains us to respond instantly to everything. Under these conditions, it becomes easy to mistake agitation for engagement and busyness for importance. We move constantly, consume constantly, react constantly, and call it life. But beneath all that activity, many people are mentally scattered, emotionally restless, and spiritually tired. Holiday's book is a response to that condition. He argues that stillness is the hidden ingredient behind clarity, excellence, self-command, creativity, and peace. It is what allows leaders to make better decisions, artists to hear their deepest insights, athletes to remain composed under pressure, and ordinary people to avoid being conquered by stress and distraction. The book is not calling us to disappear from the world. It is calling us to live in the world without being consumed by its noise. And that is what makes the message so powerful. Stillness is not presented as a luxury reserved for monks or philosophers. It is offered as a practical necessity for anyone who wants to live deliberately rather than reactively. In that sense, the book is both a warning and an invitation. The warning is that noise has become normal. The invitation is that there is another way to live. One of the most useful things Holiday does in this book is redefine stillness. Many people hear the word and imagine inactivity, silence in a narrow sense, or a withdrawal from ambition and responsibility. But Holiday frames stillness as a condition of alignment. A still person is not empty or absent. A still person is centered. Their thoughts are less chaotic. Their emotions are less tyrannical. Their body is less agitated. Their attention is less fragmented. That inner order gives them access to better judgment and stronger action. This is why stillness is power. It helps a person resist the pressure to react instantly. It creates the pause in which wisdom can appear. It allows someone to separate what is urgent from what is important. In that sense, stillness is less about stopping everything and more about being undisturbed enough to see clearly. Holiday connects this idea to ancient traditions, especially Stoicism and Buddhism, which both recognize that a restless mind suffers and that freedom requires some form of internal discipline. But he also makes the idea modern. The modern world is a perfect machine for the destruction of stillness. Attention is monetized. Outrage is rewarded. Speed is celebrated. Convenience is everywhere, but peace is not. Under those conditions, stillness becomes a kind of rebellion. To think before reacting is rebellious. To create silence in a world of constant stimulation is rebellious. To refuse to let ego, fear, and comparison dominate your inner life is rebellious. Holiday wants the reader to understand that stillness does not remove you from life. It helps you return to life with a steadier hand. It is not escape from reality. It is what makes reality easier to face. The first major part of the book focuses on the mind. Holiday argues that stillness begins with the ability to think clearly, and clear thinking is impossible when the mind is overloaded, reactive, and constantly interrupted. Many people live as if all thought must happen in motion, under pressure, and with endless input pouring in. They assume that more information leads to more understanding. But Holiday suggests that understanding often requires the opposite. It requires space. It requires distance. It requires quiet. The mind cannot properly digest reality if it is never allowed to settle. This is one of the central insights of the book. Clarity is not simply the result of intelligence. It is also the result of mental conditions. A brilliant mind can become chaotic if it is overstimulated. An ordinary mind can become remarkably perceptive if it is disciplined and calm. Holiday keeps returning to the value of reflection, silence, and perspective because they allow a person to see what agitation hides. When we are rushing, we mistake intensity for truth. When we are emotionally stirred up, we exaggerate what is right in front of us. When we are flooded with noise, we lose the ability to hear the deeper voice of judgment. Stillness of mind restores proportion. It helps us see the bigger picture. It helps us notice what truly matters. It allows us to delay reaction long enough for discernment to enter. This matters in leadership, work, relationships, creativity, and personal decisions. A person who cannot create mental space is more likely to become impulsive, distracted, and manipulated by the loudest thing in the room. Holiday wants to protect the mind from that fate. He is arguing that stillness is one of the conditions of wisdom. Without it, attention splinters, thought becomes shallow, and action loses intelligence. Holiday's critique of distraction is one of the book's most relevant themes for modern life. We live in an environment designed to fracture attention. There is always another message, another headline, another opinion, another temptation to drift away from what matters. The problem is not only that distraction wastes time. The deeper problem is that distraction weakens the self. It prevents depth. It makes reflection rare. It leaves the mind restless even when there is nothing urgent happening. Over time, a distracted life becomes a reactive life. We lose the ability to stay with a thought, a task, or a difficult feeling. We become dependent on stimulation. Holiday treats that dependence as dangerous because stillness cannot grow in a mind trained to flee from quiet. If every pause must be filled, if every moment of boredom sends us reaching outward, then the mind never learns how to settle. It never learns how to concentrate deeply enough to see patterns, test assumptions, or develop wisdom. This is why the book is not merely recommending better focus as a productivity strategy. It is recommending a different relationship to attention altogether. Attention is a moral and existential resource. What we attend to shapes the kind of person we become. If attention is always hijacked, inner life becomes weak and fragmented. If attention is protected, inner life becomes deeper and more stable. Holiday's message here is both challenging and hopeful. The world may be noisy, but we still have some power over what we let rule us. We can create boundaries. We can reduce unnecessary input. We can decide that not every invitation deserves our mind. Stillness begins, in part, when attention stops being treated as endlessly available. The second major part of the book turns from the mind to the spirit, and this is where Holiday broadens the discussion in an important way. A person can be outwardly composed and still inwardly restless. They can sit in silence and still be consumed by envy, anger, greed, ego, and comparison. For Holiday, real stillness requires more than a calm schedule. It requires an ordered inner life. The spirit becomes disturbed when it is ruled by craving. The desire for status, more possessions, more praise, more control, more victory over others, more proof of importance. These appetites create constant motion inside the self. They make peace difficult because they are never fully satisfied. This is why Holiday links stillness to humility, gratitude, and restraint. A person who is always trying to enlarge themselves becomes incapable of rest. Their peace depends on external outcomes they cannot fully control. Their identity depends on validation that constantly shifts. Their emotions rise and fall with comparison. Holiday wants the reader to see that stillness is threatened not only by technology and schedules, but by ego itself. If you are internally addicted to proving yourself, then silence may become uncomfortable because it removes the audience. If you are internally driven by resentment, then stillness becomes difficult because the mind keeps replaying wounds. If you are internally hungry for more and more, then enough never arrives. In this sense, stillness of spirit becomes a form of freedom from domination by appetite. It does not mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming less ruled by the forces that create chronic internal agitation. Holiday's treatment of the spirit gives the book depth because it moves beyond technique and into character. The question is not only how to feel calmer. The question is what inner habits are making calm impossible. A recurring message in this section is that stillness becomes possible when a person learns the discipline of enough. Modern life trains people to chase endlessly. More recognition, more money, more influence, more novelty, more proof that their life matters. Holiday does not deny that achievement can be meaningful, but he warns that a life governed by perpetual dissatisfaction will never be still. The spirit needs some relationship to sufficiency. It needs the ability to appreciate, not merely acquire. This is where gratitude enters the book. Gratitude is not presented as sentimental positivity. It is presented as a stabilizing force. It reminds a person of what is already present. It weakens the frantic energy of comparison. It interrupts the endless logic of scarcity and lack. The person who cannot appreciate what they have will often fail to enjoy what they get. Their inner life becomes a treadmill. Holiday's point is that stillness depends partly on what kind of relationship we have to desire itself. If all desire is expansion, applause, or conquest, then stillness is impossible. But if desire is disciplined by gratitude, humility, and purpose, then action becomes cleaner and less compulsive. This is one of the book's quietest, but most profound teachings. Stillness is not found only in reducing noise outside us. It is also found in reducing the noise made by endless wanting within us. To become still is, in part, to stop chasing versions of fulfillment that only deepen restlessness. Holiday's decision to include the body as a full third of the book is important because it keeps stillness grounded. Inner life is not separate from physical life. A body pushed into constant exhaustion, overstimulation, and tension will affect the mind and spirit. Poor rest clouds thought. Chronic agitation shapes emotion. A rushed and overtaxed body makes patience harder and reaction easier. Holiday therefore treats bodily care not as self-indulgence, but as part of self-command. Sleep matters. Breathing matters. Rhythm matters. Time outdoors matters. Movement matters. The body can either become a partner in stillness or a source of additional turbulence. This perspective is refreshing because it avoids the trap of treating peace as purely intellectual. Stillness is embodied. It is felt in how we move through a day, how we handle fatigue, how we regulate stress, and whether we build any room at all for restoration. Holiday is not suggesting perfection or an idealized lifestyle. He is pointing toward physical habits that help the whole self settle. Walking, resting, exercising with balance, creating margins instead of endless acceleration. These are not glamorous practices, but they are deeply practical. They help bring the nervous system out of constant emergency. And when the body is less frantic, the mind can think more clearly and the spirit can remain steadier. The lesson is that stillness is not just a thought pattern. It is a way of inhabiting the body more wisely. One of the strongest ideas running through the whole book is that stillness and self-mastery are inseparable. A person without stillness is often at the mercy of whatever emotion, fear, craving, or distraction arrives next. Their inner life is ruled from the outside in. The louder the world becomes, the less command they have over themselves. Holiday wants to reverse that pattern. To be still is to create a buffer between event and reaction. It is to recover the ability to choose. You feel anger, but you do not become anger. You feel fear, but you do not instantly obey fear. You feel urgency, but you do not confuse urgency with importance. This ability to remain steady in the presence of inner movement is a major form of strength. It allows a person to be less manipulated by mood and more guided by principle. In leadership, this means not being ruled by panic or vanity. In relationships, it means listening rather than escalating. In personal life, it means seeing temptation and restlessness without being immediately conquered by them. Holiday does not define mastery as domination in the aggressive sense. It is more like inner governance. A well-governed self can act deliberately. A poorly governed self is always leaking energy into reaction, drama, and confusion. Stillness is what makes governance possible. It is the condition in which a person can hear themselves clearly enough to refuse what is destructive and choose what is wise. A subtle but powerful challenge in stillness is the key is directed at the modern worship of busyness. Many people feel important because they are overwhelmed. They feel validated by having too much to do. The schedule becomes proof of value. Constant motion becomes a status symbol. Holiday questions this deeply. A busy life can be meaningful, but it can also be disordered, avoidant, and spiritually thin. Busyness can hide the fact that a person has never clarified what actually matters. It can become a shield against self-examination. As long as everything is urgent, nothing has to be understood at depth. Stillness threatens that arrangement because stillness asks difficult questions. Why am I running this hard? What am I avoiding? Which of my commitments are truly necessary, and which are serving image, fear, or habit? What would happen if I stopped measuring my life by visible activity alone? These questions can be unsettling, which is one reason people resist stillness. Busyness gives the feeling of progress even when life is not aligned. Holiday's message is not to become inactive. It is to become intentional. Action should come from clarity, not compulsion. Work should be guided by purpose, not merely by acceleration. Stillness allows a person to distinguish between a full life and a frantic life. That distinction matters enormously. One can be rich in purpose and poor in noise, or rich in noise and poor in purpose. The book invites us to choose more carefully. Holiday's book is philosophical, but it is also practical. Stillness must be trained. It does not appear automatically in a culture built to destroy it. So, what does practice look like? It may begin with creating silence somewhere in the day before the world gets hold of your attention. It may mean walking without input, giving the mind room to breathe. It may mean journaling, reflecting, or sitting long enough for the inner static to begin settling. It may mean protecting sleep more seriously, reducing pointless stimulation, or becoming more selective about information. It may mean learning to pause before sending the message, making the decision, or reacting in anger. It may mean gratitude practices that weaken the endless chase for more. It may mean learning to be alone without immediately reaching outward for distraction. The specifics can vary, but the principle remains the same. Stillness is created through chosen habits that make room for depth, perspective, and recovery. Holiday does not offer stillness as a magic state that, once found, stays forever. It must be renewed. It is vulnerable to stress, ego, fear, and overcommitment. That is why practice matters. Every small act that protects attention, quiets ego, steadies the body, or creates room for reflection becomes part of a larger architecture of calm. Over time, these practices do more than make a person feel better. They change how that person meets reality. One of the reasons Stillness Is the Key is so compelling is that it does not oppose stillness to excellence. It presents stillness as one of excellence's hidden conditions. Great work often comes from focused attention. Wise decisions often come from emotional restraint. Enduring leadership often requires calm under pressure. Creativity often emerges from quiet rather than noise. Holiday makes the case that stillness sharpens action because it removes distortion. A still person can see more clearly what the moment requires. They are less likely to be thrown off by chaos, less likely to mistake volume for importance, and less likely to let ego interfere with judgment. This matters not only for public achievement, but for private life. Parents need stillness to respond instead of merely react. Partners need stillness to listen. Professionals need stillness to focus. Citizens need stillness to resist manipulation. The inner life always spills into outward life. When the inner life is chaotic, outer life becomes more reactive and shallow. When the inner life is steadier, outer life becomes more thoughtful and coherent. Holiday's promise is not that stillness solves every problem. It is that stillness changes the quality with which we meet our problems. That alone can transform a life. In the end, Stillness is the Key leaves the listener with a vision of life that feels both ancient and urgently modern. The world will remain noisy. Ambition will remain powerful. Pressure will remain real. Distraction will remain available at every hour. Holiday is not offering an escape route from those facts. He is offering a center from which to face them. Stillness becomes that center. It is the place from which a person can think, choose, endure, create, and live with greater integrity. The book reminds us that many of the qualities we admire most in others, wisdom, restraint, patience, depth, courage, and clarity, are not usually built in frenzy. They are built in a quieter interior space. To become still is not to become passive. It is to become harder to control by chaos, harder to seduce by vanity, harder to scatter with distraction, harder to knock off course by every emotional gust. Ryan Holiday's final challenge is simple but demanding. Protect your inner life. Guard your attention. Reduce what disturbs without adding meaning. Let gratitude calm desire. Let discipline steady the body. Let silence deepen thought. Let stillness become not a rare accident, but a chosen practice. In a culture of constant motion, that may be one of the boldest and wisest choices a person can make.